So I want people, when they see the brand, to feel like they're going to be in for a good time. It's just a good cheesy sauce. Yes, it's vegan. Yes, it's made from vegetables, all these other things. But first and foremost, it's just good food and it's going to be a good time.
Well, being an entrepreneur ain't easy. Much of us know that. It really is hard to start a business from scratch, and it's especially hard to start a business you're unfamiliar with. It takes fierce determination, unyielding courage, resilience, and, well, a whole lot of faith. Fortunately, today's guest has all of the above and then some. Lauren Joyner grew up like so many people, eating a diet rich in meat, dairy, and processed foods. For her family, queso was a staple on the dinner table. However, as an adult, working as a tech startup designer, something changed, and she made the switch to a plant-based diet and began taking an interest in creating nutritious plant-based alternatives to the comfort foods she ate growing up. Fast forward to today, and she's the founder of House Party Snacks, formerly known as Loca Foods, if y'all have ordered. A cheese dip company, yes, that makes transcendent, and I'm not even kidding, plant-based queso dips capable of converting even the most staunch dairy cheese dip devotee. And it has 0 allergens, artificial flavors, or preservatives. Now, if you've been to a San Francisco Giants game recently, maybe, you might have had the great pleasure of trying one of her fabulous dips. So it's awesome to have her here today. Just to be able to have this very enlightening conversation, this inspiring conversation with such a wonderful human being, and traverse all of the challenges that she has come up against doing a plant-based dairy in the mega dairy space. So we are ready for some of the secrets to your success, Lauren. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's such an honor, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to have this conversation. And what an intro. I need to just play that every morning, on repeat as motivation to keep me going. That was so kind and such a generous, statement, and sharing my background story and all your kindness about my product. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, you betcha. Well, before we dive in to what I said we're going to dive into in the intro, you did switch to a plant-based diet and then started to get inspired to, well, basically help others switch, right? By making this food group,
Yes.
Plant-based dairy cheese. So tell us though, were you challenged by illness? Was it the animals? What kind of took the blinders off of you?
Yeah. I'll answer that question in a couple of ways, because it's not a straight answer. There's not one singular reason. There was a number of things happening that kind of led me to this point. As you mentioned, I grew up in the South eating a typical Southern diet full of meat and dairy. And, I joke a lot that I used to keep Tostitos and Velveeta in business. I mean, I would eat cheese dip, almost every day. This is, I think, how we connected in the first place, Dotsie, is our understanding and, relating to this, staple in our diets.
And we're pretty sure Velveeta is plastic, right?
Yeah.
Like we talked about what's actually in Velveeta. It's like
right.
nasty.
That's a whole other podcast,
Yeah.
probably. That could be fun. But, I actually struggled with IBS for most of my teen years and all throughout college. I even went to a couple of doctors about it, and they put me on medication. I struggled with chronic acid reflux, bloating, a long list of unpleasant symptoms that I don't have to get into. But throughout this whole time that I was struggling, not once was it asked if I could tolerate dairy or how much dairy I was eating. Never was brought up. So, I was already a great candidate for somebody to give up dairy. It just had not occurred to me for most of my life growing up. But to be fully transparent, at the time, my husband and I were living in New Orleans, and New Orleans is known as a great foodie town. And we were eating our same, Southern diet. And he actually watched a documentary one day called Earthlings. He came home and declared same day, I'm done eating, meat, land animals, basically. And I said, great. I had never enjoyed dealing with meat. I didn't like cooking with it. I was always one of those people that was picking at it. It just, I was relieved. Okay, fine, that's no problem for me. So we started eating a pescatarian diet. At the time, I was still consuming dairy, though. As much as I would like to say that I gave up dairy, like that, that's not how it happened. But it kind of started me to think about our food industry, how our food gets made. And it really opened up my eyes to factory farming. Fast forward to around 2014, we moved out to California. And I had, kind of the privilege of being surrounded by all types of cuisine, a ton of fresh fruits and vegetables. I essentially just started progressing in my knowledge about health and how much the food that we're eating directly impacts our well-being. And so started just to clean up my diet even further, eat more plants, eat more vegetables. And eventually, for whatever reason, kind of made this click in my head, like, oh, wait a minute, I think all this dairy that I'm consuming may be contributing to all of these IBS symptoms that I'm having. So finally gave up dairy and almost immediately felt so much better. I have not had acid reflux or bloating or dealt with any of that since I've given up dairy. And so it was really a combination of both my understanding of factory farming and honestly my just shock and disgust with the whole industry, my love for animals combined with being lactose intolerant as well. There's all kind of sorts of things that were propelling me toward this diet shift.
And did your husband also take out the dairy too when you took out the dairy? Was it a family affair?
Yes, it was, which I think made things much easier. He's actually different than me in that he doesn't have as much of a love for junk food dairy products as I did before. So it was a little bit easier for him to give those foods up. It was a little bit harder for me, but yes, we did make the switch together, which, is wonderful.
So you started what is now House Party in
Yes.
2018. And
Yes,
I remember you saying that you just started experimenting at home and on the
did.
weekends, right? Because you had a full-time
Yes.
job, but you're just like, okay. Did you see a hole in the space, or did you just have such a love for creamy, gooey cheese, AKA that was Velveeta for us,
Yeah.
that you wanted to do it better?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So I started just experimenting at home. I'd get home from work a full day, and just started playing around in the kitchen. And, I had no background or knowledge of the food industry. I didn't have a background in food science. I started out just genuinely trying to play around for myself. I felt that the products that were available to me in the grocery store that I was buying and that are delicious and that I love, they just didn't quite capture that junk food taste I was going after.
Right.
They tasted a little bit more of it just had a different taste and texture. And while delicious in and of itself, it didn't replicate that Velveeta, that Tostitos dip that I was still craving. So it certainly started out with selfish, intentions. But, as I was progressing on this journey, I started connecting the dots. There was a few things going on. I have nut allergies in my family. So I quickly realized that when I was trying to recommend these dairy alternatives to friends and family, it wasn't an option for a lot of people because many of them are nut-based. They're made with cashews, or almonds. And then I started digging a little bit further and educating myself around water usage and certain crops and how that impacts climate footprint and all that. And so that was sort of, mulling around in my brain. And I also realized that the vegan cheese alternative products were being marketed in the refrigerated shelf, and the packaging was different. At the time, a lot of them were served in plastic tubs. And so when you would go to the chip aisle and see the dairy queso and the Tostitos and the Velveeta, there wasn't really anybody that was competing in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did feel like there was a huge market opportunity to reach people that are used to buying these junk food products. And so without, going into a long-winded story here, that's really what started getting my wheels turning. Yeah. Long story short, I was experimenting, and I kind of got this MVP product that I thought was decent. And I shared it with a friend of mine who also had actually just left her job in tech, and she was starting a food company, not in the same space, but still kind of had that same mindset and energy. And I asked her if she had any resources to help me kind of explore this idea. She connected me with a commercial kitchen in San Mateo called Kitchen Town. I pitched them the product and they said, "We think you have something. Come join us and we'll help you understand how to, commercialize a food product. We'll teach, you can work with a food scientist, you can learn the ropes." And so very quickly, I quit my job, quit my whole career, which was kind of crazy. And I just decided I'm going to give myself 6 months or so to see if I can have something, test it, see if there's anything here, and then, make a call, either come back to my career or if I've got something, pursue this further. But I wanted to do something that would help contribute in a small way, in a big way, to making positive changes to the food industry. That was the big goal.
Yeah. I want to just talk about market share really quick, because I think that was, I remember when I first talked to you, Lauren, it's like one of the most genius things that you did was you looked at that space, which is the dry space in the chip aisle, right? Where the nacho cheese is, right? It doesn't have to be refrigerated. And there's literally no competitors. And I remember you telling me the story that when you started fundraising and you took this to the hoity-toity snooty snoots in San Francisco, if you will, right? That invest in food tech. Yep. And you said what it was. They're like, who eats nacho cheese? And then I just want you to share the market share of nacho cheese, because it is mind blowing. I didn't realize it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And now I'm remembering kind of our earlier conversations. And I still remind people of this today. I think growing up in Arkansas, living in the South, gives me an advantage because, the foods that I have access to here, I didn't have access to growing up necessarily. And a portion of my family lives in, what we would call a food desert. Or I think there was someone who went on your podcast recently that said it shouldn't be called a food desert. It should be called a nutrition desert, which was genius, by the way. But it makes you aware of the types of foods that the average American are truly eating, what they have access to, and their knowledge. And I did feel like there was a bit of a knowledge gap with who I was talking to out here in San Francisco that didn't accurately reflect how Americans were eating. But just to get into the statistics, I still get asked that question today. I mean, are Americans really eating that much processed cheese? People aren't really still eating Cheez Whiz, are they? Are you kidding? Absolutely they are. So in the pandemic in 2019, 2020, and I hope I'm, reciting this data correctly, but according to the Nielsen data that I had gotten access to, Tostitos did 87 million sales on one SKU, one flavor of their cheese dip alone. And this was during a time when, consumers were starting to spend a little bit less. So think about that. That's just one flavor of one SKU. And in the category, cheese dip, Cheez Whiz, all these processed cheeses, they're outperforming these more artisanal cheese groups. And it didn't surprise me, but it did surprise a lot of people, and still does, that I talked to today. And you're correct in that I, at the time, and still today, honestly, because I'll get into this later with Whole Foods, but there really isn't a lot of companies that are going after those shelf-stable junk food cheese sauces. And I think there's a reason. I'll get into that in a bit. But yeah, so I hope that was the data that you were looking for, but it is quite mind-blowing.
Yeah. Yes.
I heard a really interesting story from you that said that one of the reasons that motivated you to actually quit your job was that your experience applying to an effective altruism conference. Can you share that story?
So yes, I had applied to be part of the Effective Altruism Conference. I wanted to attend and, attend one of the workshops. And this is when I was still working in tech. And yeah, I got rejected. And it sort of, it blew my mind, because I think the reply was, you don't have any background, or you're not working in this industry, you're working in tech, and we just don't think you're a fit for being a part of EA. And totally fine. They have to make a decision. It's their business. But it made me realize something, that you're going to get a million no's no matter what you do in your career. And the best way to do something is not to wait around for somebody to give you permission or give you a promotion or offer you whatever it is you want to do. It's just to do it. Just do it. Start it. Do it yourself. Start something. If you want to make change, make the change. You don't have to overcomplicate it or wait for somebody to give you permission. I think you'll have a better chance of just getting out there and doing it.
That's great advice.
Thank you.
So I know we're going to delve into the business of a plant-based product, especially one like yours. But can you tell us a little bit about your product? What makes it different? What is it made of? And anything that you want to share with us. How long did it take you also to get there to the one you have today?
Yes, I love that question. Well, our products are very different from what you'll find on the market today for a number of reasons. It's made from vegetables, so it's also top 9 free. We are literally using whole, real produce in our sauce. And
when you say top 9 free, there was a
yes.
couple, like you said, MVP earlier, and I wasn't sure what that was. So I'll just
my acronym.
And then top 9. I'm assuming that's allergens, but
yes.
for our audience.
Yes,
okay.
great clarification. Top 9 allergen free. And it's meaning, there's no nuts, there's no gluten, no soy. I should have all 9 memorized in my head, but I don't. And it's, we're using whole produce on a sauce. That's a big differentiator. A lot of food products are using, canned vegetables or, another form of the vegetable, whereas we're actually throwing in like whole jalapeno peppers. We also source all of our ingredients from the USA. We're getting our crops from farms here in the USA. Nothing's made overseas. It's all made here. Our product is also full of B vitamins, so it's got a lot of nutritional integrity behind it, and it's shelf stable. And that is, again, a big differentiator. And I think, Dotsie, you kind of tapped on that a little bit earlier. That was my biggest goal, is I want it to be shelf stable and have the same shelf life in comparison to, dairy counterparts. And so that is
how do you do that
differentiator?
Right. Without all I can think is, okay, chemical time.
Yep.
How do you keep it shelf stable? And don't forget to mention it's mainly potatoes.
I want you to share your potato, your pro potato stance, I should say.
Everybody knows that Alexandra and I both have a massive potato obsession that listens to this podcast.
This is why we all get along.
Exactly.
Potatoes are amazing. But anyways, I love that. So yes, this is a great question. And I love that you've asked this, because unfortunately, I feel like we're sort of living in this age of misinformation. Social media is a wonderful tool, but I also see a lot of, there's a lot of pseudoscience going on. There's a lot of armchair nutritionists and whatnot. I'm sure you both see this, right? And I should also caveat by saying, I do not have a degree in food science, but I have worked with a number of food scientists, and I try to educate myself and read, the literature that is available. But, refrigeration versus shelf stability, they do not necessarily equate to health and nutrition, right? So you could have a product that's shelf stable that may have more nutritional integrity behind it than you could a product that's refrigerated. And actually, a lot of times companies will have the same formula, one's on the dry shelf and one's in the refrigerator, because they're trying to capture a different consumer. I won't say which products they are, but it is quite common. And it is challenging.
You can say which product. I mean, so
I'm going to get in the hot seat on this podcast. We're calling out Velveeta. We're calling out I love it. Maybe if I, keep growing in 5 years, we can, have a new type.
Got it.
We need these people on our side, on your side.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. But, shelf stability does not necessarily equate to a lack of nutrition. It comes down to how the product is manufactured. So there's a number of ways you can achieve shelf stability. It all has to do with temperature fill, the type of process you're using to manufacture the product, and pH level. It's pretty simple. I think
Oh,
where
wow.
shelf stability gets a bad rap is if a product is retorted. So a lot of canned foods are retorted, and there is this
What does that
thinking that
mean?
so I think the best way to explain it is are you familiar with like a hot filling a product? Just or let's take old school canning. Did you have grandparents that would can their own food? No?
No, but
Okay.
can
I had a
you-
grandparent that would do that. And I'll just use that as an example. I think that's probably the most relatable. So old school canning, which is still done today, is essentially has to do with the temperature that you heat the product to when you're cooking it. Typically, you want to hit between 175 or 200 degrees. You want to have a holding time. So you want to hold the product at that temperature to make sure to kill, any microbes, any bacteria that's going on. This does not necessarily impact the vitamin content though. It's a kill step, so to speak. It's a safety kill step. And then you'll fill it, you'll invert it. So you want to make sure the lid is heated, and then you'll flip it over, and then there's a cooling down period. And you want to make sure that cooling down period happens rapidly. Again, it's another kill step. I don't want to go into like a whole food science lesson here, but that's basically canning, at a super, super high level. And it's a very straightforward process. So hot filling is similar to that, but on a much larger scale. And it all has to do with temperature, holding time, filling, and then kill steps that happen after that. And another important caveat is pH. So pH is how acidic a product is, right? And so the more acidic and more lower the pH is, that creates a less likely environment for microbes to grow and thrive. So it's just a few building blocks here to achieve shelf stability. And I think shelf stability is wonderful for solving our food crisis because it ensures that a product lasts longer. It's going to eliminate safety issues, right? So if you're creating an environment where there's less likelihood of bad, microbial activity to occur, then the food is going to last longer. You're going to have less food safety issues. And I think it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. It's a great achievement of modern science. And the big thinking is here, we can reduce food waste and we can feed more people. We can have food that lasts longer. So I'm very much a big proponent of shelf stable products.
It's a little bit like our stomach. We've learned from gastroenterologists on the show, the more acidic of an environment our stomach is, the less likely it is for a lot of the good bacteria to grow and thrive that we need to fight disease. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. So no chemicals. So yes. Okay.
Yes. So you'll use an acidifier, and you'll use, we use gluconic acid, we use xanthan gum in our product to achieve self-stability, to achieve an emulsification that's close to dairy. But there's all sorts of acidifiers. They're not all the same either, right? And they're not all equal, just like carbs aren't all equal, right? And so there's so much to get into and explore there. And I love that you've asked this because I've been thinking about doing maybe a series of videos and getting my food scientist friends to come on and just talk about this, at a very scientific level, just to educate people that are interested, because I do think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I find it to be fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you for covering that. In going back to you in your kitchen playing around.
I know I went on a tangent there. Sorry
no, it was
that.
so important. I'm so glad Alexandra went down that path. But I'll speak for Alexandra. If she and I went into the kitchen and started playing around trying to make cheese sauce, neither one. So there must. I mean, you knew. Well, what did you even do? Did you know it was going to be potatoes? So, I mean, literally, I'm just so curious that the first day, what are you grabbing from the refrigerator in the cabinet to play around to see if you can make this shelf-stable cheese sauce delicious?
Yeah. So, at the time, there was a number of great blogs and recipes out there, how to make homemade vegan cheese. And, I was playing around with all sorts of bases, coconut oil, cashews, potatoes, whatnot. But I was really fascinated by utilizing potatoes because, potatoes get such a bad rap in the health food space. And it's just it's not for good reason.
No.
Potatoes they're drought resistant, they're full of nutrients, they're satisfying. I mean, they're wonderful, amazing crops.
Yeah.
And I primarily was gravitating toward potatoes because who doesn't like potatoes, right? It's an easy sell. I think it's hard to find somebody that doesn't like potatoes in some format. And so when you're thinking about pitching this product to a non-vegan, a hook that I like to use is, well, do you like potatoes? Give it a try. I'm sure you like French fries or potatoes in some form. This is not a weird, strange foreign food. It's just, potato based. And so I think it's an easy way to get people interested and feel comfortable with trying your product.
I haven't heard of, I've heard of cheeses have the things you mentioned, like cashew and soy and almonds and things, but I haven't heard of a potato-based cheese. Was there a cheese that inspired you to even think about potatoes? The creaminess is amazing. And that's what gives your products. So I would imagine one of the things, so much creaminess, richness too. How did you even come upon the idea of potatoes as an ingredient? Had you been making some potato vegan bisque or something?
No, actually, there wasn't anyone. I don't think there is even today. Maybe there are a few now, but at the time, no one was using potatoes. They were all cashew and almond based when I got my start. But there was resources online, blogs, different recipes, but nothing that was using the ingredients I saw a lot of people that were throwing potatoes in with the cashews and in with the coconut oil, but not just
almost to bulk it up. I would
allergens.
imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And I give so much credit to Kitchen Town and their team there. They're equipped with amazing food scientists, chefs, people that are so much more knowledgeable than I am. And they really helped actually connect me with what's called a process authority through the FDA. You have to work with a process authority before you can sell a product that's shelf stable. And they connected me with the right PA, educated me on what I needed to do, and helped me learn.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want. So that would be it sounds like that's what you would recommend to someone who's getting inspired by your story and might want to start selling to the public something that they love. To make it home, is to get into a commercial kitchen because of the knowledge of the other cooks and the kitchen itself?
Honestly, it was an incredible experience. And I think when you start out making the product yourself, you just naturally have such a clear understanding of what you're making. You can speak to the product better. And it just gives you this knowledge set. I think it's a great way to start. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone though, because it was very exhausting. I will tell you, Dotsie, you mentioned Oracle Park. This is kind of a funny story, but in 2019, when I was starting out in the kitchen, I was making the product. It was just me making it by hand. When I first started, I was hand peeling all the vegetables, by the way, before I upgraded to this like commercial vegetable peeler, but I would make it for like 8 to 10 hours. And then I would drive it to Oracle Park and I would, drive my little car between all the big Cisco trucks at the drop off. I mean, it was classic. It was ridiculous.
This is for folks who aren't football, baseball fans. This is the stadium in San Francisco.
San Francisco Giants. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So, it was wild days. It was exhausting. And there were so many moments where I just wanted to break down and just think, what have I done? What am I doing? But it gives you a deeper understanding and appreciation for how food is made and how it works.
Yeah. You're going up against, you make the cheese, right? And then you drive in your little car to see it at the stadium. But then you start thinking about the, big time, which you've thought about since day one, really. But it was a go time to scale.
Yes.
Scaling is one of the hardest and scariest aspects.
Yep.
And then scaling up against big dairy is a whole nother level of scaling.
Yeah.
It's intimidating, and they own all of the shelf space.
Yeah.
So it took a ton of courage that we've spoken about already. But what in the world do the steps even look like?
Yeah.
I remember you being, I don't know if you still are, at that dairy processing facility in Wisconsin, right? Was that? Anyway, I'll let you dive in because
great memory, Dotsie. I'm so impressed. Well, and before I get into this, I also just want to share, when you are, thinking about Tostitos, they own the chip aisle. There's a reason they're the only ones on that chip aisle. So, I wouldn't even be able to sell my product in, conventional grocery, like say Walmart. I couldn't be near Tostitos there. So that's a whole other, separate issue.
Like, if
talking
you
about the
walked
reach and
into-
ownership, it's substantial.
Do they
in
just
that
say
category.
that? Like, if you walk into Walmart or Kroger brand or the big grocery stores and they go, oh, it's delicious, and you say, I want to be on the chip aisle. Is it just a hard no? And do they say why?
Right. They can't happen. I don't know the exact workings of it, but I do know they essentially own that space. They pay for that. Forget the name, but if you've ever gone to a chip aisle in like a Walmart and you see just the Tostitos are lined up all the way down the aisle, it's in the middle, they own that. So nobody else can compete in that area. Right. That's why you see Velveeta and Daiya and all these other brands, they're on a separate section. That's by design. Yeah.
I see. That's what I was going to ask. So are there other sections you can go to that aren't the vegan section or the natural food section, which now are less and less as they're being integrated into the regular aisles, but there used to be very separated?
Yes, you're exactly right. Well, very timely question, because we just launched into Whole Foods in all 51 Northern California locations a few weeks ago. Thank you. I'm thrilled. Yeah. And I have to say, they've been a really wonderful partner. I've been working on this for almost a year and a half now, to be honest. And they put us in the chip aisle. We're right next to the Dairy Queso, the 365 brand, which is so exciting. That's just exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be on this chip aisle. And when you go into natural grocery, you're not dealing with the same competition like a Tostitos. They have different rules. So we are able to be on the chip aisle in natural. But it's also presented another challenge, right? Because if you're already eating vegan or you're seeking out a dairy-free cheese, we've sort of been trained over the years to go to that refrigerated section, right? Mm-hmm. I shop there all the time. It's where I get my Tofurky, my tofu, my Nyokos. It's all there. So there's this new challenge now of, one, educating those customers that, hey, we're actually opposite. We're on the chip aisle. And two, we're actually a healthy, nutrient dense product too. We're just not in the refrigerated section. But the placement was intentional because I want our product to appeal to a broader audience. I want to capture people that are, maybe they're lactose intolerant. Maybe they still eat meat on occasion. Maybe they eat meat all the time. Maybe they eat dairy all the time. I want to capture a broader audience. So that's very much by design.
Yeah.
But I took us off on a tangent, I think, but I thought it was a great, point that you made.
Speaking of bringing in more and more people, tell us about how you do market something that is plant-based, but that might, if you tout that, it might turn off some people and it might draw other people in. So how do you balance that? Tell us about your marketing plan.
Well, actually I'm learning and doing my best to soak in the data and shift and try new things. Offering the product in D2C for the last year has been fantastic because I've been able to
another term I didn't understand.
I did it again. Direct to consumer e-commerce, selling online. That's been great because you're able to run all sorts of ad sets, try out different copy, and then see what works and what's resonating with which audience you're testing with. So that's been wonderful. But I will say, now that we're in grocery, I've done a few demos to get things started over the last couple of weeks in Whole Foods. And it's been telling because I'll kind of shift, my pitch just to try things out. And actually I was demoing on last Saturday at a local Whole Foods, and a few people walked by. They saw our new Party Cow on our jars, and they saw that it was in a jar, and they said, I don't do dairy. Because I said, it's made from vegetables. I don't do dairy. I said, it's actually dairy free. Few people I said, it's dairy free. And they said, gross, another vegan cheese, right? So,
right.
The thing I have to remind myself is, one, there's no food that exists in the world that is universally loved by everyone.
Yeah.
So trying to make everyone happy is a futile effort in and of itself. But I do choose to lead with plant-based, but I love to say dairy-free, and I like to say made from vegetables. That's kind of our new brand language. You don't see me saying vegan a lot right now, and that's intentional. Maybe it's not the best decision right now, but I'm trying to reach an audience that may have a negative connotation with the word in their minds, and I want those people to give our product a chance and to think about this food differently. So that's what we're doing right now. We'll see if it works.
Yeah, no, I mean,
we do have vegan on our product. I mean, it's there on the back of the jar.
Yeah.
And if you search me at all, you'll see on LinkedIn, you'll see my involvement with MFA and all that. But I choose to be vegetable forward, plant forward on the front of the jar.
Yeah. So back to scaling, because you get the product right? Good enough that you think that you're ready, right? Yeah. Your mindset is like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm sure you wrestled with all sorts of self-doubt, but before you still do, right. And you've had to continue to overcome that critical voice, right? At every juncture. But what is the commercial kitchen have you do? Because I'm assuming that, they were so instrumental in your whole journey. I mean, what's even the first step for someone who's curious about starting a food business like this? I mean, where, 1-800 Costco. I mean, how do you do it?
That would be nice, actually.
I know, right?
We should make this a thing. Yeah. New project. We'll add it to the list. I think there's a couple of ways. I think the first question is asking yourself, for any business, one, do I want this to be a lifestyle business? Do I want this to be a venture-backed business? That will sort of in and of itself take you in two different opposing directions. And then let's just, pretend that you've made that decision, then you can act accordingly. But if you go the venture capital route, that would maybe lead you down a different path where you want to take on big investment. And the idea behind taking venture capital is you're going after capturing market share as fast as possible. That's why VC gets the bad rap of these companies aren't optimizing profit right now, but that's very much by design. They're going after capturing market share, and then they'll figure out the kinks later. Whereas with the lifestyle business, you're typically taking smaller check sizes from angels or family members, or maybe no money, and you are focusing on profitability from day one. For me, I like to be in the middle. I'm a big proponent of just fundamentally good business practices. I don't want to just burn cash. I want to make sure that our financial model is looking tight, it's looking good, and we can achieve a profitability from day one while also capturing market share. I will say, though, that has been really tough, and it's been very eye-opening for me in the last few years. And Dotsie, I think you asked me this question earlier, and I took us off on another tangent, but with food in general, the food industry is so complex, and it's a low margin business. It's just, it's a terrible business. I hate to say it, but it really is. it's so different than, let's say, beauty or fashion, where the gross margins are so much higher. Food is really hard.
Give us an example.
So, generally with food, the average gross margin that most CPG companies are getting are anywhere between 30 to 45%. You get a thumbs up. With beauty, it can be as high as 80% and you get a thumbs up, right? So you have more money to play with, which gives you more opportunity to spend on marketing, right? There's so many benefits to having a higher profit margin, but this is just how our industry is. People are only willing to pay so much for food, right? Yeah. And we've been trained, and there's all sorts of reasons why the prices that we pay, I don't think necessarily reflect the cost of the food.
Especially now.
The last dairy, year, right? Because when you're doing when you're running a vegan business, right? We don't get subsidized. Right. We don't. There's so many complications and headwinds that we're all dealing with, and something that's kind of been weighing heavily on my mind lately is this idea of a vegan tax. And I loved the work that you all did with Starbucks, right? And trying to eliminate this like $2, $3 upcharge for buying an alternative product. What frustrates me is when companies have achieved such scale that they are offering their product at a wholesale price that is at price parity with their dairy counterpart. So let's say Oatly, for example. I don't know their numbers, but I'm sure they're offering the product pretty in line with what their dairy counterpart is offering into Starbucks, but Starbucks is perhaps still adding that upcharge. That's frustrating. Mm-hmm. But for the
all the other milks Starbucks makes themselves.
Oh, I didn't even know.
They're coconut, soy, and almond. Yep.
Really?
Oatly is the only one they buy that's a plant milk. Yeah.
What?
So there you have it. Yeah.
Is it private labeled, or are they actually making it?
No, they're making it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. I had no idea. Well,
so they really shouldn't be charging 80 cents because to your point, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it hurts everybody because, for example, we're running a lot of, ads online, and a lot of comments I'll get is, "Oh, great, yet another expensive premium vegan product. It's just another greedy company." Or someone has said a greedy corporation, which makes me laugh because here I am, it's just me. I'm like, well, okay.
You're like, here you go, honey.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the sad reality of it is, for a lot of smaller companies like myself, so I have a number of friends that are in this, tricky problem, is we're just trying to break even. You're doing amazing if you're actually, have a positive contribution profit at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And it's tough because we as consumers want products that are ethically made, that have fair labor practices, that have produce that's grown in the US. We have all these demands, but they're fundamentally, in opposition to the price that we're willing to pay. And it's very, very complicated. And the experience that I have is going into retail, for example. It is so hard to even have a product on shelf for the price that it is. And it's not even the price that I want. If I had it my way, I would love it if we could offer our product for $4 a jar. But then I'll be out an enormous amount of money every time someone buys the product. But we're at $8, and that in and of itself is really a big hardship. And I'm happy to get into the numbers and kind of how it works from a distribution standpoint, and if that's of interest. But it's a really tough business. It's a low margin business, and it's almost better, I think, to get into it when you are a little bit ignorant, because I almost wonder if I knew everything I was going to be up against, if I would still be doing it.
Yeah, no, I think this is fascinating. The numbers would be great, and help us to understand how a subsidized product like dairy hurts everyone involved.
Yeah,
in the business and the consumers.
Yep, 100% agree. Well, I'll give a great example of just how a product gets priced on retail shelves. So all the layers that are involved until it hits the end consumer. So let's start from the beginning. For my product, I'm going to throw out some random numbers here. Okay. So let's just imagine, with everything that's going into making a dairy cheese dip, they are, saving costs by using artificial flavors and ingredients and, you know, cheap fillers and all these other corners that are keeping their product as cheap as possible. Also, as you mentioned, subsidies from the government and other things going on to help them achieve a cheap price point. Falsely, I would argue. But let's say it costs them $1 a jar to make. And then you have my product, which we're using real produce. Everything's made in the USA. We're not resorting to using, you know, artificial and other ingredients that are significantly cheaper. So let's say it costs me $3 to make the product. So in and of itself, it's already costing us triple just to make the actual product. Well, once the product gets made, you have to pay for freight, right, to get it to your warehouse or the distribution center. And when you're small, you're not doing, you know, enormous volumes of products. So I'm not, you know, going to a freight company and saying, I have 20 truckloads of product to move. I'm saying I have a half a truckload. What pricing can you give me? So you'll have to pay LTL fees, which are higher. That's a limited truckload. That's what I did the acronym again. But so you're already paying higher price points just by being small. This is just getting started. So let's say the product gets to your warehouse. Then, you know, you are having to go to a big distributor to get your product into big grocery. So for example, with Whole Foods, we have to sell into a distributor called UNFI. And everybody has to get paid, right? So everybody is going to need to take some margin to have their business going along the way. So I'll sell it into UNFI at whatever markup that I'll do. Let's say I'll take a 20% or 30% gross margin. I'll mark my product up. The distributor will take anywhere between 10 to 40%, depending on how big you are and how much sales you're doing for them, right? So if you're smaller, you're not going to get as good of a, you know, margin with them. They'll sell it into Whole Foods. They will do everything that they can to get the product on shelf in a timely manner. Whole Foods buys it from them, and then Whole Foods is going to mark it up as well. And they're going to mark it up. Typically, 40% is kind of the lowest gross margin they'll take.
Wow.
40 to 45%. So if you do the math in your head really quickly, you can see how the product can easily end up being $10.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
the small startup is not actually taking very much money at the end of the day on each jar. You may end up only, you know, making 10 cents a jar. So you can see how quickly, if you're not doing enormous volume, it's very hard to cover your costs and grow your business. And I think the reason that a lot of these legacy brands are able to survive on such low margins is because they're doing such big volume, right? And they've been playing this game for 60 years, right? I think I saw a graphic recently that said something like 90% of the food we buy in grocery stores are owned by, you know, eventually, if you take it all the way up, owned by like, you know, a dozen big companies, right? And so we're fighting against that as well. And so it's hard to start out and have a price point that isn't, you know, just naturally double what consumers are used to paying for the animal-based product. So that's why it's so important to have, you know, a small community and the vegan community, if you have the means to support these startups, to support these brands, because for most of us, our goal isn't to be, you know, these greedy mega companies that will always have a price point that's triple the cost. I know for most of us, myself included, we can't wait for the day that we can achieve price parity with our animal counterparts, but it's just going to take some time, and we're going to have to achieve volume to get there. And that's just, you know, the reality that we face.
It also shows us that from the subsidy standpoint, how it could go even cheaper because they are getting paid. Why you can get a $2 for a gallon milk, and soy milk for a gallon is almost $3.50, depending on, and really there might be nothing cheaper to produce than soybean and water together, right? Than what the monstrous cost and output is from every aspect of a dairy cow. Makes no sense at all. And so you can see then, you know, that adding that layer, it's just dirt cheap.
It's so, it's such a great point. It's so horribly inefficient, and the numbers don't make sense. You're talking about, you know, everything that's involved, the crops, the water, the land, a whole animal's life,
waste.
However long their sad life is going to be allowed to live, 6 months a year. It's crazy that these products are as cheap as they are, because you're correct. Like at the base level, crops, some of these crops, soybeans, corn, potatoes, they are dirt cheap. right?
Yeah.
And it's very,
Yeah.
it's very
It's hard on
frustrating.
farmers too, the people who
Mhm.
grow those crops.
Mhm.
Tell us about packaging. You come from an artistic background, so I'm curious. Tell me about the packaging and your decisions around it to try and compete as a healthy. You mentioned the word junk food. I don't even like to call it a junk food.
I know.
It's as delicious as
Good
some of the
food.
junk foods, but so yeah, tell us about some of the thoughts, because you've rebranded, and I'm curious
Yeah.
why you rebranded. Was it those Facebook polls, or was it because you had to scale up
Mhm.
and you needed to change your image?
Mhm.
I appreciate you asking this question. I'd love to kind of share, the rationale behind the brand name change. I've got a jar right here. I'll show it off real quick. These are the
Yay.
new labels. Is our Party Cow mascot front and center. When we're using the word cheesy, and we call out dairy, nut, soy free, and made from vegetables. And the brand name is House Party. Honestly, I have been sitting on it for a long time, to tell you the truth. House Party to me is more reflective of my, upbringing, how I would eat these foods. But beyond that, there's also an intentional connection that ties into the history of this product. So, just to start from my personal story, and Dotsie, you may be able to relate, but cheese dip it's a party food, right? It's something that I would always have in my house, whether it was a birthday party, a movie night, game day, like there's always going to be chips and dip. So it's just a good house party food in the literal sense. But there's also this kind of like homage I'm trying to pay actually to Velveeta and Tostitos. So
Yes.
Velveeta created their product post World War II. It was kind of a byproduct of the war. They were looking for a way to utilize the scraps left over from cheese making. They launched the product, I believe it was in the 40s, I want to say, but where it gets really interesting is in the 50s, when we had, refrigeration, and refrigerators were making their way into modern American homes. At the same time, we had sprawl. We had families that were moving out into suburbia. They were buying bigger homes for the first time. They were having kids. And women found themselves working more in the home. And what was happening is, husbands would have dinner parties. They'd have their bosses over and their coworkers. So Velveeta saw an opportunity to start marketing this cheese sauce to families as a party food. So if you look in their early ads, the ads were all these like party food appetizers, and it would just have the recipe printed. And it was genius because people were buying it, and it was marketed as a way to elevate your social status by making cheesy party appetizers that were going to, wow your guest. And so it took off like crazy. And then fast forward to the 70s, when Tostitos came out with cheese dip, they actually launched with the tagline, bring the party, something like that, bring the party, I think.
Yeah.
So it's always been this party food. And there's no reason we have to, continue on offering it the way that it has been, but it can still be this fun food, right? So I want people, when they see the brand, to feel like they're going to be in for a good time. It's just a good cheesy sauce. Yes, it's vegan. Yes, it's made from vegetables, all these other things. But first and foremost, it's just good food, and it's going to be a good time. So that was really the big, goal with the brand change. And it's been good for me too. It's been a challenging, honestly, really tough couple of years, personally and professionally. And just this new name, I feel like it's really giving me new life. I'm excited, and just trying to have a lot of fun with this business, because it is really, really hard, and it's easy to get bogged down with it all. And I just, I want to have fun with it at the same time. And I want people to feel like it can be a fun thing too.
Now, with the packaging, though, to just go a little deeper, you
Yeah.
were in glass jars,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
tell us about your decision there, because that's heavier, and maybe you tell us about why you chose glass over plastic. I mean, Dotsie and I are thrilled that you did, but for the environment, but you might have some other thoughts on it.
Yes. Well, the primary goal is I want consumers to have the same experience that they're used to when they buy dairy, cheese products. So, people are used to buying cheese dip in a glass jar. It's actually in a 15-ounce straight side, not the 12-ounce we're in, but I want them to have that same experience, because my thinking is, for those that are not automatically buying vegan products, I want to reduce all barriers, reduce like anything that could, cognitively that could be holding them back. So what will make it easier? What will feel natural? What's just this easy swap? Oh, that looks like what I'm used to buying. Must be similar. That's the primary thinking, but also, yes, of course, it helps keep our carbon footprint much lower by avoiding, plastic as well. But it really does come down to consumer usage and perception.
It's much more expensive, right?
Oh,
than
yes.
plastic?
Yes.
What, can you give us some numbers there?
Oh my goodness. Well, tying into just the last couple of years being challenging, in 2020 and 2021, there was a major glass jar shortage. And a lot of the big companies, in an effort to make sure that they wouldn't go out of stock in the pandemic, they bought up all stock of the glass jars. And so it was really hard for small brands to even get access to the jars. It caused, some of our delays to manufacturing. But yes, it's more expensive, and we get our glass from the US. Actually, Arkansas, funny enough, is one of the biggest glass jar manufacturers. And it's expensive to ship too. That's been really tough for selling online. We subsidize the shipping cost. It actually costs us anywhere between $11 to $15.50 to ship our product, and we charge our customers $8.99. So it's costly. It's costly to ship glass as well, but I truly think it's worth it.
Yeah. Why did you decide to go, this is getting to the weeds, but I've always wondered why you did the tall and skinny versus the short stubby, like Velveeta, like right next to.
Didn't want to, and it's not by choice.
Okay. Really?
Yeah. It's very, very expensive and very hard for me to get that jar.
Because all the Velveeta and all that, they're buying.
It's very, very hard, but it's on my wish list. I'm working toward that day, but it's crazy expensive. We actually looked at it. I was hoping we could pull it off before our Whole Foods launch, but unfortunately, I think it ended up being almost $1 more to get into that jar size. Very, very cost prohibitive right now, but hopefully not forever. And luckily, Whole Foods has been really positive and supportive about the jar, because it's also, can be used as a cheese sauce too. So you can use it as like a macaroni and cheese sauce. So sauces are typically in this jar. So we're kind of like skirting the lines between the two right now. But, cool. Maybe one day we could have a sauce in this jar and a dip in the other. That would be the dream.
Yeah. So give us your BHAGs, your big, hairy, audacious goals, because now we've got a good, solid understanding of the history and how hard this whole push has been. And congratulations on Whole Foods.
Thank you.
NorCal, you said 40 some odd.
Yes.
When
51.
51. Okay. And then coming down to SoCal, I hope soon.
Oh, yes.
Because I think it would
that's my jam. Yeah.
Fantastic here and down across the border where it would really, really do well.
I agree. Hint, hint, Whole Foods.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. Yeah. So what's in line? How can people help and support too?
Oh, thank you. Well, I've always been a big proponent of food service. I hope that we can expand more in universities and restaurants and sports arenas. That actually was my initial plan before the pandemic. I wanted to actually be almost an exclusive food service business. I launched online and now in retail, honestly, as a byproduct of the pandemic. It's worked out very positively, but I'm trying to intentionally get back into food service and carve out a space there. The volume is substantial, the margins are better, and also you get to work with chefs, and it's so exciting to have somebody with so much knowledge of food prepare your product, because they're going to prepare it in the best possible way. And then the consumer who's trying it for the first time is likely to have a really good experience because it's been prepared, professionally. So I love food service. I hope to grow more there. I want to continue, to expand and do as well as we can in Whole Foods. I've intentionally chosen to start small and start locally because retail is expensive. I didn't even get into things like chargebacks and slotting fees and promos, which also just tank your margins. That's another podcast. But honestly, I couldn't even afford to go nationally right now if somebody offered that to me. I just don't, it's too expensive. So starting small was the goal. And I want to make sure that we just do as best as we possibly can. So if anyone's listening and they are near, a Whole Foods here in NorCal, it would mean the world to me. And it will truly make a difference for determining if we get to stay on shelves, because we are actually we're in the candy and snacks category. We're not in the vegan cheese category. So I've actually accidentally made it even harder on myself being in the chip aisle. So we're judged sort of indirectly in the same grouping as the dairy queso and the salsas, which sell, they sell a lot of product. And so I've got my work cut out for me, and every sale truly at this stage makes a world of difference. And in terms of just supporting me, I think, stay positive. I would just tell people, if you feel bogged down with the weight of everything and you feel like you can't make a difference, or, you're just frustrated with the reality of the food industry, I get it, but truly the power lies with the individual, right? I mean, we all have a chance every day with the food choices we make to make a difference. And it may not be immediate. We may not see it tomorrow, but we've seen it with milk, right? In the 90s, it was impossible to find just soy milk. It was all milk. And look at the shelves today, right? It takes time, but every dollar counts. If you can't afford our products or other premium products right now, that's fine too. Do what you can with what you can, and just try to be, just positive.
Yeah. Well, everyone has to jog, run, sprint into the 51 Whole Foods in NorCal. I'm positive we've got a lot of listeners from up there. So make it happen, ladies and gents.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Lauren. And
hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review, and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.